Good afternoon. My name is Sister Jean Poore, and on behalf of Dominican Sisters of Peace, I would like to welcome each of you to the Martin DePori Center this afternoon for this roundtable discussion on human trafficking. It is such an honor for us as Dominican Sisters of Peace to host this event. Of particular mention, our special guests, Senator Rob Portman, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, State Representative Teresa Feder, Ohio Dominican University President Dr. Peter Symbolic, members of the Central Ohio Rescue and Restore Coalition, and Teresa Flores, the founder of SOAP, Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution. Welcome, Teresa. The Dominican Sisters and Associates of Peace are committed to work to end human trafficking. We commend the work of every individual and every organization committed to bringing an end to sexual exploitation, forced labor of any kind, or any practice similar to slavery or servitude. Our chapter commitments call us to stand in solidarity with those who are marginalized, especially women and children, and work with others to identify and to transform oppressive systems. I would like to offer the congregation's prayer to end human trafficking before I turn the meeting over to Michelle Hannon, who is director of the Central Ohio Rescue and Restore Coalition. Compassionate God, you are ever present to your children in their times of greatest need. Draw near then to those who are victims of human trafficking. Gift them with courage and hope as they struggle to envision freedom and a better future. For all who work to end this evil practice, we ask for the grace of perseverance, creativity, and strength of purpose. Use our minds, hands, and hearts to do your work, for we are yours. Amen. Michelle.
Thank you, Sister Jean. On behalf of the Central Ohio Rescue and Restore Coalition, I want to thank the Dominican Sisters for hosting us here today in this beautiful facility, but not just for today, but for your ongoing, your leadership that has really spanned a very long time around this issue of human trafficking. So we appreciate that leadership and partnership. The Central Ohio Coalition was founded in 2007 by many of the people who are here in the room. So I'll skip over some of the lengthy history there, but I just want to note for those who may be less familiar that the coalition today is a group of about 100 organizations and hundreds of individuals who are working together to combat human trafficking. And we do that work with a focus in a number of different areas. Raising public awareness is really critical and key. Providing strong networks of services for survivors is a really important piece of the work as well. Working around legislation and advocacy, which brings us here today, is obviously a real focal point of the work. Strong partnerships with law enforcement are really key as well. And then also working to get on the front end of this problem with demand reduction and to try to really stop this horrible problem from happening before it begins. So our work since 2007 has been to pull together the community and to guide our efforts in those different directions. And I'm really pleased to say we've made great strides since that time, which leaves us with we have so far to go that it's almost unimaginable. But truly we've come a long way, and I think today is a great example of that. When you look around the room and so many people who've now been working together very effectively for years, and I think we've got the right folks at the table to move forward. So thanks for being here. And I am really pleased to have the honor to introduce some of our distinguished guests here today. And I'd like to start with Senator Portman. So United States Senator Rob Portman, as most of you know, he was elected in 2010 on a platform to bring jobs back to Ohio. And since then, he's worked hard in the Senate to reduce our deficit, reform our burdensome tax code, and promote pro-growth policies to help create jobs in Ohio. But there's another important issue. He's taken real leadership in the U.S. Senate, the effort to help combat human trafficking. In fact, Senator Portman and Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut have started the Senate caucus to end human trafficking. Senator Portman, thank you so much for being here and for convening this group today. And please join me in providing a warm welcome for United States Senator. I just brought you back to Ohio here, Rob Portman.
Thank you all. It's great to be here. And Michelle, thank you for your hard work. And I was impressed that you noted you have 100 organizations now involved to work with you and the Salvation Army and members of the coalition are here today. And I thank you for your good work. I look forward to hearing from you. This is the perfect place for us to be. So thank you very much to Sister Jean and for the Dominican sisters for allowing us to be here. Martin, of course, probably if nothing else, is viewed as the most compassionate person in the history of the church. So here we are talking about compassion. Right? So it's a good environment to be in. I appreciate the fact that I'm joined by my colleague Joyce Beatty. Some of you know Joyce very well because she was representing the Columbus area. I've loved working with her on a number of issues, and this is one. I'll talk in a moment about some legislation that we introduced yesterday in the Senate, and I know that Congresswoman Beatty is going to be talking about it as well because she and I are going to partner on this, and she's going to introduce that same legislation or similar legislation in the House, which is very rare. So it's not only bipartisan, it's bicameral. Something could actually get done in the United States Congress. I also want to thank Teresa Feder for being here. I joked with Teresa when I saw her. I said, I always see you by video because I'm not always able to come back to Ohio, but Teresa sometimes will call and say, we're doing something on human trafficking, and you send a video. So I sent one and I would say, hello to Teresa Feder for all her hard work, but she has been on this issue for a long time and has helped to organize in her own area, Northwest Ohio, but also statewide, a lot of efforts dealing with human trafficking. Not just the specific issue we're going to talk more about today, sex trafficking, but the broader issue. And I thank her for her commitment to the issue. She had an annual Human Trafficking Awareness Day at the State House last week. It's the 5th annual, as I recall. Time we've done this, and there's just a lot more awareness now in our state as a result. And some of you know, Ohio has taken the lead really nationally on this issue. And Representative Feder and others have been involved in some legislative activities in addition to the raising of awareness on this issue. And it comes, frankly, from the fact that as you learn more about the issue, you find that it's happening right here in our own communities. My first exposure to this, to be honest, and the reason I jumped into this is that when I was first elected 3 years ago, a bunch of school kids from Toledo actually asked me to be involved with a video to thank them for the work they had done as volunteers with the issue of trafficking, specifically sex trafficking with young girls. And so I read up on it to be able to say something in the video that connected to what they were doing, and found out that Toledo at that time was number 4 in the country. Unfortunately, in terms of the number of arrests, the number of prosecutions, the number of data points they had on human trafficking. Toledo, Ohio, number 4 in the country. And as you learn more about it, of course, this issue is in my hometown of Cincinnati, in Cleveland, Columbus, and even in our rural areas. And increasingly, it's an issue, again, where we're not just raising awareness, but doing things about it. We don't have the best data on this issue. We'd like to have better data, but this is what we know. In 2012, Ohio law enforcement received about 20,000 reports of missing children. Runaway youth accounted for about 12,000 of those children. And based on the data we have, 1 in 8 of those runaway children are likely sex trafficking victims. So again, this is a problem that relates to hundreds and even thousands of our kids every year. And I think that one of the things that we can do legislatively is do a better job finding missing children. And the federal government plays a big role here because, as you know, there's a national center for missing children. The FBI is involved when there's a missing child. And so the legislation that Joyce Beatty and I are working on has to do with ensuring that we can find these missing kids who are on the run. Often they do get entangled into this horrible issue, and there's no one to stand up for them, and there's no one to take their case, no one looking out for them. So we've introduced this legislation called Bringing Missing Children Home. It's the Bringing Children Missing Home Act of 2014. It was conversations with Ohio law enforcement, and I see we have some members of the law enforcement community with us here today. Thank you for being here, who have worked with us on how to improve this system so that it works better at the local, state, and federal level. I really think we have an opportunity here to refine and streamline what is a program that already works, but not as well as it should. For instance, it now would require, under our legislation, that law enforcement update records of children more frequently. That's one of the complaints we've had, is there haven't been the frequent updates to be able to find these kids. One thing that I find is really important is that you now would be required to have a photograph of the child. That seems sort of obvious, but it's not required now. Dental records are, by the way, but not photographs. Give you an example. In the last 30 days here in the state of Ohio, there have been 16 children reported missing, and we've only got pictures of 6 of them. And without a photograph, it is incredibly difficult, even with a photograph, to find these kids. So this is one thing that our bill does. We also streamline the process to make it work better for everyone. Attorney General Mike DeWine worked with us on some of that because he had some strong views on how it could work better between the federal government, FBI, and state government and our law enforcement. It cuts out some of the red tape that's involved right now that keeps child welfare and law enforcement working together. So better coordination, including child welfare, working better with the state missing persons unit is part of the idea here to expand the information available for investigations. You can find these children more easily. Also, right now, the missing persons units and the state attorneys general can't modify the records in this national database, which is called the National Crime Information Center, NCIC. They have to have written permission, and that permission sometimes is difficult to get. So this bill allows the modification of entries to include information that's uncovered as an investigation goes on. It can be done by missing persons units, state law enforcement. They would have the right to do that. So it makes common sense. It's just one step. There's other legislation that we've introduced in the Senate that actually has gotten enacted into law that's been helpful in this area, broader issue of human trafficking. It's an international issue, but it's also a national issue, it's also a state issue, and it's also a local issue. And there are more things that we can and should do. In the Senate, we did start this caucus on human trafficking a few years ago, a Democrat and myself, and we've had some good, again, awareness sessions in Washington just to get people up to speed. And we found it's not a partisan issue, it's not a political issue. It's just about ensuring that our neighborhoods are safer and that the basic human dignity that comes with blocking human trafficking is something that everyone should be able to be on board with. And so we're working, again, to make sure that it stays above politics and stays in something that we work on at every level of government, from the community and the family through our state government and our national government. With that, again, thanks so much for having me here. Michelle, I'll turn it back over to you, and I look forward to hearing from everybody around the panel.
Thank you. Well, it's now my pleasure and my honor to introduce Congresswoman Beatty. And let me just give you a little background for those who need a refresher. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty was elected to Congress in 2012 to represent the 3rd Congressional District of Ohio. And prior to her service in the U.S. House of Representatives, she served 5 terms in the Ohio General Assembly. During her tenure, she rose to become the first female Democratic House leader in Ohio's history that was instrumental in passing legislation that improved the climate for economic development in the state. She supported local home ownership, fought foreclosures, championed the science, technology, engineering, and math curriculum, passed groundbreaking financial literacy legislation, and worked to help women without insurance receive life-saving cancer screenings. We are so pleased that you are here today, and so pleased to have the opportunity to share with you some of the needs as you are already very aware of in our home community here, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, first let me say thank you very much, Michelle, for such a gracious introduction. And the honor is mine to be here, to be in the heart of my district, to be in a venue that I love dearly. Mr. President, thank you for being here. I'd be remiss if I didn't say I hold an honorary degree from your university. Sister Jane, thank you to you and all the other panelists who are here. But first, let me start by saying I would not be here in this role if it were not for the senator. And he was far too kind far too generous in his words about me. So I'm going to take a minute of my time to share with you what makes a difference in Congress. Because every day as we turn on our TV and we hear so many of the negative things, I think it's important for us to share, and it will help guide you, that there are folks like Senator Portman who are there reaching out. You heard I was elected in 2012, but I've only been in Congress serving for about 11 months. And I can tell you, less than 30 days in office, I decided to do a project and called Senator Portman. His answer was yes. There was no red tape. There was not a lot of questioning. His staff came. He came and did a presentation for me, and he was just stellar. Now, certainly, he is in the upper house. He is a senator. He's done a lot. So, secondly, when I got the call that Senator Portman wanted to meet with me after that as a freshman member in Congress, I was like, okay, what time are we going to leave to get to his office? Can't be late. We're going way over to the Senate. We're going to take the subway and the train. So I was so excited. And he said, why are you doing that? He's coming here. That's unheard of. I'm like, I'm a freshman. I don't have anything on the walls in my office. And the senator, she said, the senator said he's coming to you. That speaks volume about this man and this senator. And since then, we have a partnership on some other legislation. But when he called and his staff, so I have a surprise for you. Before leaving D.C. last night, I dropped the bill.
Oh, fantastic.
So I consider myself an upper class. That's how excited we were to be a part of this team. I don't have the long history, and this is what makes me a good partner. I was one of those individuals like the audience here because someone out there is here to learn because they can't believe the stories that they read. But I had the great fortune to serve in the Ohio House of Representatives with Representative and also former Senator Teresa Fetter. And I remember like yesterday when she walked into our caucus and started talking about this issue. So, you know, there are some folks you just follow. Everybody can't be the leader, but Teresa, I say to you, I have followed this. And so when Senator Portman shared with me all of the work, I knew immediately I wanted to do this. And so to my second Teresa here, I decided, well, let's read about this. And as I read excerpts from your book and started reading about your story, I knew that this was something I wanted to be engaged in. And then to top it off, law enforcement being involved and all of the diverse groups who are here today. I want to be a leader with this, and I pledge to the senator and to you that I too will look at starting a caucus on the House side to work with this. Because that's how we make it work. I also had a conversation with Sister Jean, and we talked about the importance of working together. It doesn't matter what your gender, what your race, what your ethnicity, and certainly what your political party is. This is a human problem. This is a problem that can touch anyone at any time. And I think that's what's so good about this, that we're going to work together as colleagues. And that's rare. I mean, that's rare. But how do you make a difference? How do you stop this sex trafficking? How do you get the message out? You do it by working together to make that difference. And one last thing, it is so important as you look at the legislation and the foundation that we're building on to now have the Bringing Missing Children Home Act, is we're going to make sure that our children are not tagged with that word prostitution. We are taking that out of this and we are changing it because we are inserting child sex trafficking. Our children are not the enemy. So we're going to go after those folks who get them engaged and get them involved. And then we're going to make all of the other changes that the senator talked about. So I know my most powerful words I can say to you, Senator, to you, Mr. President, to Teresa, both of our Teresas, and everyone else that's here, and that's thank you. Because we need your help. And the outpour that's here today will make a difference as we move forward to do all of the things that the experts are going to tell you about. But we need you not only in Columbus. I know Teresa was in Cincinnati. I know she has gone all over this state, and I know she will share that. I also will tell you that she has the background and the experience that I'm sure you will hear about. She passed a House bill at the state level. She has been certainly our sojourner on this. So I say thank you to you for that. And thank you, Senator Portman, for allowing me to have the opportunity to be engaged in something that's so important as this. So you will hear me talking about this bill. My staff is here. I'd certainly be remiss if I didn't introduce Greg Beswick and Ron McGuire, who are here. We had a briefing on this before coming here. So I want all of Ohio, no, I want the United States to know that you're getting ready to see a bill that's going to go forth because of Senator Portman and Congresswoman Joyce Beatty working together to make a difference.
I may be biased in this regard, but in my work in anti-human trafficking, it's been my sense that Ohio really has been at the forefront. And so I think the work and your efforts, the both of you, it really just, I think, supports this amazing legacy that we have. And certainly Representative Feder and her colleagues are so largely to, we owe her such thanks for helping Ohio get on the map and to really be a leader across the country. So thank you for all being together and pulling together on that effort. And then I just want to just say a few words of introduction about one of our two amazing Teresas. There are more than probably the two amazing Teresas in the state. And they're here today. But many of you will have already had the pleasure of meeting Teresa Flores. And Teresa has been, I guess my introduction to Teresa was in 2006, 2007 when our community started to come together and to start to address this issue. And Teresa was at the forefront at that time and has been just an amazing advocate and a tireless advocate throughout that time and has done some pretty creative and amazing things. And so as of course, the survivor of trafficking, an author, an advocate, an international speaker on this issue, the founder of SOAP, which is Save Our Adolescents. I know I can never do this without reading it. Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution. And just want to say thanks again, Teresa, for being here, and I think you're going to share a few words with us.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to thank you, Representative and Senator, for including me in this, for giving me a voice at this table, because my voice represents hundreds of thousands of others, not just mine. In about early 2000s, I was having PTSD pretty bad, and the trauma was getting really hard. I needed some help healing. So I wrote Geraldo Rivera and Oprah and asked them for help. But I didn't have any name, like I didn't know what to call what happened to me, and I never got an answer from either one. And years passed, and I went to a conference where Representative Feder was at. And at that conference, I learned the name of what it was called. And that hit me like a 2x4, because I also realized that if I was 41 years old and I had just graduated with my master's from University of Dayton, and I didn't know that, then how many others don't know it? And you see, my oldest daughter was turning 15, and I knew that was going to be a tough time for me, because 15 is when it happened to me. And I didn't know how good of a mom I could be to her without having healed from that. Nothing exempted me from this happening. As you said, this happens to, there's no boundaries of race, of, how much money you make, poverty, what part of town you live in. There's no exemption to this. My grandfather was a very famous judge, and he was asked to be the prosecuting attorney for the Nuremberg trials. I had dinners, Sunday dinners with senators and monsignors, and that was just the way my life was. It was private planes and nothing, but that didn't save me from becoming a victim. When I was 15, I was targeted by a group of guys that saw me as being vulnerable, and I think every kid is vulnerable in some way. But they saw which ways I was vulnerable in, and I got groomed by one of the guys. I kind of had a crush on him. He was always there, very, very sweet guy, or so I thought. And he ended up raping me, drugging me and raping me. And pretty soon, the rest of the deal came, and that was that I was going to be blackmailed, and I had a debt to owe them. If I wanted those pictures back, I had to do whatever they said. So a couple years ago, I was talking to a detective at Oakland, California, where they have a huge problem with this. And he said, Teresa, the technique is still the same. And that shocked me, that 30 years later, the technique of finding a girl, targeting her, grooming her, drugging and raping her, and blackmailing her is the same. So what are we doing wrong? Because if it's still happening, and even more so now with the internet, then we're not doing something right. I was forced to put it nicely, service anywhere between 2 to 6 men several nights a week. And nobody ever asked me how old I was. Nobody ever questioned me, why was I there? Or if I wanted to go home. Nobody ever asked those questions, not once, in 2 years. There was even families upstairs in the homes that I was at, and nobody ever came downstairs to see why somebody was screaming. You see, I don't consider myself having been a prostitute. I was a kid. And I was missing, but nobody knew I was missing. If my parents would have checked my bed at night, they would have seen I wasn't there. And they didn't know where I was. They wouldn't have known where I was. So technically, I was missing without anybody knowing it. But nobody was coming looking for me. Because who would have ever thought that would be happening to an upper-class kid? If the police would have pulled over the car that I was in with several men, I would have gotten in trouble, not them. I've heard this said a few times, and it really hits me hard, is that if a man has sex with a 14-year-old, he is charged with molestation or being a child predator, right? But if he gives her money, now she's charged with teen prostitution, and he gets to leave. So why is it that the exchange of money makes it something different? And it transfers the blame onto somebody else. It shouldn't be. I have realized that I wasn't the only one after I started doing this. It was very lonely in the beginning, and I had a hard time thinking that anybody else went through something that I had gone through. And as I've done this over the past 7 years, the most shocking, hardest part for me is all the emails that I get from people. Women in their 20s, 40s, 60s, saying they have a similar story to mine. That devastates me. I can guarantee you every time I go and do a talk, no matter where it's at, I have at least one person that comes up to me and hugs me and just looks me dead in the eye and says, thank you. And I know. Or they'll whisper, me too. and they've never told anybody. This has got to stop. When a couple years ago, I was doing a lot of talks and spending a lot of time bringing awareness to this, I realized that that wasn't enough. We were building strong laws, we were getting a lot of momentum with Corsi and with Representative, and we were doing a lot of good. But people would come up to me and say, well, what can we do about it? And I didn't have an answer for them. And that was really frustrating to me, to leave a group of 400 people that just came and heard me speak and tell them I don't know what you can do. Because I wish that somebody would have helped me. And when I went back to Detroit one time, I realized of all the girls that were there, stuck in a motel, servicing man after man, stranger after stranger, and they just wanted somebody to talk to. They just needed somebody to hear them. They didn't have a voice. And they don't know they're a trafficking victim. They think they're a prostitute. But they just don't know how to get out of it. And so I decided that we would put a hotline, the National Human Trafficking Hotline number, on a bar of soap, because they wash up after every man. Many times it's the only time they're alone. They can go in the bathroom and shut the door. And maybe she would see that phone number. And when she can, she could call it just to talk to somebody. And so we started soap, a very special, simple bar of soap. And we started getting it out to cities with big sporting events, though we have done many, many different kinds of events. And we started getting volunteers together. People wanted to help. And I was shocked by all the people that said, yes, we will help you. How much is it? You know, let us help. Let us do something. Let us put a sticker on here. And then we started going to the hotels with the soap. And we gave it to them free. And I couldn't believe how many hotels said yes. I couldn't believe it. I was just going to be happy if one hotel took my soap. And the most amazing part is that we took missing children's posters. And Tasha knows that that's the hardest thing that I do, is make these missing children's posters. I have to go through, before every event, through the whole National Missing Children's website and choose who goes on that poster by her picture. And that's the hardest thing, is to know who is going to be there. We give those posters to every hotel, and we say, have you seen these girls? Can you post this at your front desk? Here's a phone number to call if you see her. They don't know there's a phone number, and they're so happy that they got a phone number. Now they know what to do. You see, they saw her as a prostitute, as a menace. But now they realize that she's a missing kid. She's a runaway, and she deserves to be found. And it has taken a whole different life, just a whole different turn of reframing how these motel owners see her. Last weekend, we were in Detroit. I went back to where I was trafficked. And we did an outreach, and we probably had 150 people come out just to help. We got out 12,000 bars of soap, and of the 88 hotels that we went to, 78 said yes to the soap. It's in 78 hotels, high-risk hotels in Detroit, because we have the auto show now. But the most important thing to know, that I want you to remember, is that 3 girls were identified. 3 girls were identified that have been seen in and out of there. One of the hotel people said, I've seen her in here every month with an older guy. Now he has a phone number to call. So we need action steps like this. I can't rescue them without a photo. And I need people to know that she's not a prostitute. She's a missing runaway child, and she deserves to have a good life. So I just want to thank you for the support that you've given this issue, because it means a lot to me personally, and to all the other Teresas out there. Thank you.
Over to Sister Nathan Buchanan, and we're going to have an opportunity for some open discussion about this issue and legislation needs.
Okay. I represent the religious part of it. When I go out, I've been asked to talk about this, that it's a real privilege for me to be with the survivors. No judgment. As soon as I tell them, I go, by my title, Sister Nadine. When I tell them Sister Nadine, they say, "You're a real sister?" And I'll say, "Yeah, like a nun," And it's amazing the trust they give to me. I'm very humbled by it. And immediately, they start to tell me their story. One of the things, though, before they start that, a lot of the women have said to me, "Am I going to hell?" And I cannot tell you what that does to me every time, because God loves them so much, but they haven't been told that. A lot of them didn't grow up hearing that. And so they tell me their stories. They ask me to pray with them. I mean, their prayers are beautiful. I learn from them. So I can honestly say I love every event that I go and work at, because I feel like I'm taking from them. I get more than what I give. And Teresa and Tasha have been a big part of my life. I was asked to give an experience, a firsthand experience of seeing trafficking going on. We were going to the Detroit International Car Show last year. On our way, Teresa's car needed oil. So we stopped off at the Speedway on the way to Delaware. Well, we all got out of the car. Tasha had to go in and get something. Teresa went in to get oil, and I got out to stretch. And as I turned around, it was everything she told in her talks. Here was this great big white Cadillac off to the side. He wasn't even pulled up by the gas pump. He was off to the side. And I saw these two young, straggly, shabbily dressed girls. They could not have been more than 13 or 14. I just turned around and looked at that car. And they looked so unhappy. Well, as soon as Teresa came out with the oil and Tasha came out after getting stuff we needed, I said to them, "Look at this." We all formed a wall of women. We got in the back of her car by the bumper and just looked. Well, he said to the girls, "If you need anything, you have my number." So the two girls left. Tasha climbed in the car, got bars of soap, and went into the girls inside the Speedway and said, "Maybe you don't need this, but in case you do." She handed them the bar of soap with the 888 number on it. And it says on the bar of soap, as some of you are familiar with, "Are you being made to do something you don't want to do?" And there it was. We were on the way to the outreach, and it was happening right in front of us. We all go to gas stations, We all go to restaurants. We all go to libraries. And people say, "A library?" Yes, a library. These children are approached in the library. It's an extension of babysitting, after school. And someone goes up to them and says, "Oh, you are really cute." Well, what 12 or 13-year-old girl, even 9 years old, 10-year-olds, don't love hearing that? So he says, "I have a studio, but it's down the street, so you're going to have to come with me." Well, some of them do. They get in the car and they're never heard from again. And these are our children. And it's like Teresa said, I remember one time we were searching for pictures to go to one state for an outreach. She couldn't find pictures. And we said, "What is this? There have to be pictures, or are they not putting them out there?" So Teresa had to go into other states that bordered the state we were going to get pictures. Now that's sad, It's like, doesn't anybody care? One of the things about the ladies that I spend time with them, they want to tell their stories. And I've heard this term and I love it. It's called spiritual hospitality. And it means listening with a compassionate ear. They just need to tell their stories many, many, many times. You know, we're talking about that post-traumatic syndrome. You know, that you don't tell it once and it's over. They have to tell it many times. One of the sisters I met this morning, she walks around the house for her exercise. And she came to me and she said, Sister Nadine, I want to tell you the prayer I say every day, many times during the day when I'm walking around the house. And I said, I'd love to hear it. And it's, Sister prays to the Blessed Mother and asks her to pray to Jesus to look with tender compassion on the victims of trafficking and bring an end to this evil act. She prays it over and over and over again while she is walking around the house. That touched me so deeply because as religious, we are about prayer. It's powerful. We need education. We need prayer. We need action. And I'm proud to say our congregation is so involved. We have a human trafficking committee. We have 16 on the committee, and the sisters are all throughout the United States. We have a conference call once a month where we report what we have done and what we are going to do, what events are coming up. We are very proud, passionate supporters of SOAP, so we see that as a very valuable outreach, a very easy outreach to do, and really gets the word out. We have been to hotels, talking about the code of conduct. We have talked about cleanhotels.com, where they get a pay-per-view taken off their TVs to pornography, because as we all know, that they don't know, that pornography is what spurns a lot of human trafficking. There is another act that comes after each one of these viewings, and that they're using children and people against their will in the pornography films. We have written to the airlines about the code of conduct. American Airlines has implemented this within their corporation, and they're trying to get more airlines to take part of this. So we have written them as a committee, transatlantic as well as international. So our sisters do a lot. Prior to our committee, though, one of our sisters 23 years ago started Women to Women, where the women come here once a month. Sister Noreen Malone, she's here today. She can tell you more about that. The women come here, they receive a hot meal, and the mentors meet once a month before the meeting with the women, and they discuss, what they need to do. And then the women come here, and again, it is non-judgmental speaking. They talk, they have a theme, and they're allowed to talk without any judgment. It's a real forum for them. And so Sister's been doing this for 23 years in this area, and she has other locations throughout the city that she does it. And I've given flyers to Salvation Army also that they give out. Another thing that we did, the Fifth Avenue House, it's for first-time release women from prison, which most of them were arrested for prostitution. So this house, they have a way, many of them come to the Women to Women. So they have that forum to speak. So we've done a lot within the city for many, many years. As Michelle had already mentioned, the sisters have been involved. That's just a tip of the iceberg. I gave Stephen the rundown last week. So you can see that we are involved in many things. And again, God wants all of us to have dignity. And if that's the thing I can do for these women, be the vehicle of Christ to them, to let them know that he loves them, he respects them, and that they do deserve human dignity. Thank you. Thank you.
Before we open it up to the larger audience for your comments and thoughts, I wanted to ask if Representative Feder, if you would like to say a few words.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and the partners that we have here, we're just going to keep building. And that's what it's been about. I just want to start out with a quote from Nelson Mandela. There can be no keener revelation of society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. You know, some cultures around the world, and I've been all over the state of Ohio, really all over the United States, and in Washington, and giving President Obama, you know, when he first came in office, what do? I said, hey, here's our roadmap in Ohio. We've already done the work through the commission which I put in place, which studies the scope of the problem, makes recommendations. We're ready. You need to support us. Here it is. Here's the governor's task force that he put together, which is the only one in the United States, which comes through all the departments that we put money in. And they pretended that they had a trafficked victim. And they studied where the adequate addresses, where their needs were met adequately, and where there were gaps. We've got that roadmap. We handed it over to the federal government. But anyway, I just wanted to share, you know, a lot of people come up and share then, you know, what's on their heart. But one gentleman came up and said, you know, in my culture in South Africa, they don't say, how are you doing? They say, how are your children? Yeah. Think about it. If we just live by that, we can solve all of these things. We need to turn this around, you know, and stop blaming and shaming our children. And I just want to put out a clarion call. Even yesterday, when I was leaving Cincinnati, I got a call from a friend of mine who's in the trenches like many of us, and I'll share that. But she said, you're leaving Cincinnati? I go, yes. In a room with law enforcement. Well, she says, I found out that Cincinnati just arrested a 10-year-old child for prostitution. This is wrong.
Yeah.
That's what's wrong. We're arresting our children and jailing girls for men's crimes. We're arresting the child. She's 10 years old. I am fighting in the Senate right now for House Bill 130, where there's still this old paradigm that 16 and 17-year-olds, they just really kind of look that way, they're asking for it. Think about the Steuben bill. Oh, that situation. Our Attorney General had the guts enough to arrest and go after the superintendent and all these things. There's a paradigm shift. We have a culture of rape in this country. It's not just trafficking, it's a culture of rape. And Elizabeth Smart talks about this. She's reflected on what happened to her, you know, being kidnapped. And then just this week, as we were having our trafficking, this last week, as we were having our trafficking awareness campaign, and I made it a big event. It was like putting on a wedding. And my feet hurt at the end of the day. I went to the shoot. But we brought all these partners together. But there was an arrest of a man who had the guts enough to put on the internet that he wanted to buy a 6 and 7-year-old child for $400 to marry to take care of his needs.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, our law enforcement was on that. And then I was talking to the Cincinnati sheriff, and he said, you know, I know we've saved lives when we did our work, but I lost 2 officers, so I only have 1 to do the work. I said, oh my God, if taxpayers knew that that's where we needed our money, they would be absolutely supportive of where that money goes. So I'm here to talk about money, Senator and Representative. Because I read another article from New York City where they did the research on homeless youth. And 30% of their clients indicated that the only reason they went into trafficking because they were emancipated at 18. It's another issue. And you've done something about that, but still there's these paradigm shifts of how are your children concept. Said that they're cutting the funds for shelters for youth and putting the money and increasing money in trafficking. But you're not increasing money in trafficking, you're stealing from one pot and putting it in another. So we need, number one, from Judge Connie Zelman, who is the juvenile judge who helped us write the law in Ohio. And she's in the trenches, and I went to the people who do the job every day. Not just my idea, because I don't know anything, I have the power to do it. So you go to the people that are in there doing it. And she was at the event here for Human Trafficking Awareness Day, which everyone needs to figure out how to join next year. We had so many people, we didn't have enough room. I like that problem. But she said, I have no place for our children. You know, and before we even changed the law in Ohio, the only reason they were sent to jail is because that was the only place that would keep them safe. The only safe place for children when we rescue them. And by the way, that 10-year-old in Cincinnati needs to be rescued today. So I don't know what phone calls are going to make, but I want that done. She is not going to be jailed or arrested. She's going to be rescued and see how. Yeah. But she has no place for them. And so these shelters, you know, it's down in Cincinnati when the Lighthouse Youth Services. And the first thing I ask is, I thank you for inviting me, but I want to listen to the youth, 18 to 26, that they address. Many of them spoke very highly and was very grateful for the foster care system. And when children in the foster care system, guess who the parent is? The state of Ohio. Guess what? The state of Ohio is 50th in the nation for using state funding to support children's services. And the way they support children's services in your community is by having a levy. And guess what? They don't have levies because they don't like government. We can't pass school levies. We can't pass children's services. So all this blame shifting on the adults and how are your children needs to stop. And we need to figure out a path that's the right path forward and give people confidence through this bipartisan effort on a humanitarian issue that's just disgraceful in our nation, to build the confidence while we're doing the right thing. And that's what these two leaders are doing here, not just in Ohio, but in the nation. And that's what I did in the state of Ohio, was to show that, you know, and they're going to run to the polls to do the right thing, to put the monies for the youth services, for these young children who are emancipated, who want to have those few years to get the transition between having a high school life into an adult life. And guess what? They qualify for all of the government services to go to school for free. Okay? But they've ended up in jail, you know, through crime. So, I mean, my point, I think, for us is to listen to the Teresas, to listen to the youth who are emancipated, who are scared. I just want to reflect on the good work that we've done through the commission, through Dr. Celia Williamson, and I didn't have enough copies, but we need to make color copies because the black and white copies don't help us depict the situation. Dr. Celia Williamson did a report and talked to 328 prostitutes, people who are being prostitutes. I don't like to call them prostitutes, but people who are prostituted. 115 then she found had credible data, and she divided them by cities: Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, Cleveland, Toledo. And she wanted to know what their life was before they were recruited. Okay, this is the good work that's being done. This is our homework right here, and where we put our funds in appropriate places. And it's really an indictment on us as adults, not really taking the responsibility, not listening to the Teresas who came 8 years ago into the State House, and the Elsandras and the others who were trying to speak truth to power. And they were insulted. They were blamed. The representatives were mad, most of them were male, were mad that that can't be true. No, it's got to be your fault. It's got to be your fault. You know why? Because it's happened. It's been that way for thousands of years, and it's always the victim's fault. Right? So we now have truth. And here's the truth about Cincinnati. 40% were raped before they were trafficked. 33% homeless. Those are youth, homeless youth, 33%. Dayton, and it goes on. The categories are raped, homeless, involved with child protection, worried about what to eat or where to sleep, had a poor family, had close family member involved in sex trade, had close family member with mental illness, had difficulty in school, dropped out of school, difficulty making friends, had an older boyfriend. Folks, this is our roadmap for Ohio to fix everything that's wrong in society. Just this one page, done by Dr. Cillian Williamson. Who's brilliant and needs support to do more. And the Attorney Generals have been great enough to continue this Trafficking Commission, which I put in place that anybody can join. You don't have to be appointed by the Speaker of the House or the Senate. Anyone who wants to join to be a part of our commission is allowed and welcome to jump right in, and that's how we've gotten this far. Because we have passionate people that can just get plugged in and develop the political will that is now here. And now we have the attention.
Thank you so much. That was better. We want to have an opportunity for those who are here with us today who may have comments they would like to share that would have impact on this legislation or perhaps on other needs that we are aware of that could be addressed through federal legislation. So I'd like to open it up now and ask please if folks might be able to keep their comments somewhat brief. We have about 10 minutes left, I think, until we conclude today. So I'd like to go ahead and open that up. Tabitha Woodruff. Here, I'll just scoot this over for you today. Yeah.
Thank you all for being here today to talk about this legislation and the important work we've done, but a lot of the work that we have to do yet still. I serve as the Legislative Advocacy Chair for the Central Ohio Rescue and Restore Coalition, so it's my job to do the homework and read those bills and stay up late with the highlighter and look through what are we doing and what could still be done. We know that child sex trafficking is happening in Ohio and across the United States, and that it's horrific, and that these children are victims and not prostitutes. But we also know that labor trafficking, another form of slavery, is also happening in the state of Ohio. We know that there's children that have been labor trafficked, American children that have been trafficked in Ohio that didn't get the attention they needed from Child Protective Services, from other agencies, and even nonprofits that didn't identify what was happening to those kids. So we have a number of great bills that are coming forward and that are already there. But what I encourage our legislators to do and other folks to consider is that many of these bills focusing on child trafficking victims could be expanded to also look at children that are being labor trafficked. We know children like Mary, who was forced to work in a food cart by her abusive parents, was picked up by the police and taken to a homeless shelter where she wasn't identified as a victim of trafficking, wasn't provided services as a victim of trafficking. We know that 2 American youth who were homeless began working as nannies in a home and providing services to that family where they were sexually assaulted, beaten, and forced to work without pay as children, actual slaves in an American home. These children too deserve to be identified. These children too can be collected in our data, and as we're training, as we're educating, we should be training also on the broader spectrum of human trafficking. Of course, all human trafficking is horrific, and none of it should be happening to our children. So I have some legislative stuff that I can pass off to your aides, but those are my comments, and I want to end by just thanking you for helping us fight slavery in Ohio and across the nation. We have great leaders like you in our state, and that's why we're here today, and we're going to make a big impact. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Tab.
Tabitha, have you had a chance to look at the legislation that got out of the Finance Committee at the end of the year? It's S1118, and it's the Child Sex Trafficking Data and Response Act. And Ron Wyden and I are the co-sponsors of that, and we're working on the House on that too. But it basically compiles more data to be able to, policy-wise, make better decisions, as Representative Feder was talking about. But it also changes the definition of a child from being prosecuted to being a a victim, viewed as a victim under existing federal legislation. But I'd love your views on that bill, because it's out of the committee, but it can be amended and reformed, and also the House will have its own version. So if you would take a look at that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I can do. I'll
Okay,
send my
thanks.
notes to Stephen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I may, my name is Rocky Nelson, and I'll kind of give the law enforcement perspective here.
Rocky.
I'm with the Ohio Attorney General's Office, the organized crime section of the Attorney General's Office. And first of all, Senator and Representative, thank you very much.
Thank you. You guys have been great working with us.
Thank you for representing Ohio. We are very fortunate here. And our own Ohio representative, thank you very much for representing us and also the oppressed people that this is all for. One of the things that I have to say something about Michelle and the Salvation Army. We have a Central Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force, and often if we run across a victim that night, we have nothing that we can do in law enforcement to help the victim out. With the Salvation Army and what we've been able to accomplish through some grants and a lot of hard work, now we have somebody that represents the Salvation Army that travels with us as a member of our task force, and that's so important. Anyway, with the Missing Children Home Act of 2014, some of the requirements that it has, oftentimes law enforcement has a lot of requirements. These are good requirements. These are much needed where we have to update our records of the missing children, where we have to coordinate directly with the state and local child welfare systems. They're very needed. So we like those type of requirements. And then also it allows us as the state to, with the missing persons units and the state law enforcement, modify the missing child entry. So that allows us as state to work with the locals to accomplish that. So that's just briefly from a law enforcement perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rocky.
Thank you, Rocky. Are there any other comments? Taking a look around.
Michelle, for what Representative Federer was saying earlier and what Rocky is saying, here's an example of a missing persons, an actual missing person flyer, and this is local, Columbus, Ohio, missing since early this year, age 15, female, African American, height, weight, and so on. No photograph. So I don't know, Sergeant, maybe you speak to this, but wouldn't it be helpful to have a photograph on here and have that requirement?
Yeah.
So that's just one specific example of a young girl here in the local area.
Absolutely.
We know her name, but we don't know what she looks like.
Right. And certainly that's a tremendous hindrance. We think about the different types of outreach work, and part of the Salvation Army's work in partnership with some great folks around the community is to do weekly street outreach here on the streets of Columbus. And so we have trained teams, many of whom are here, who go out with our staff between 10 and usually about 1 in the morning every week, and are out taking a message of hope and outreach and gift bags that have food and other basic need items to those who are being sold on the streets here in Columbus. And, just thinking about that, and certainly that is, our teams take out the photographs and the information that we get from our partners at the AG's office who are helping us through the Missing Persons Bureau, and again, photographs are key. So here we have folks who are out on the streets, which is certainly one of the venues where women and girls and boys and men are being sold here in the city, and without that ability to, without the photograph, it's meaningless. When you think that the names that we typically learn, and as we get to know people week after week on the streets, the names that we're initially learning are oftentimes not, of course, their given name, but it's a street name, and so without that additional connection piece, it becomes very difficult. So,
is there somebody here from your task force who can talk about what that experience is like?
Yeah, I have a number of our team members are here. The program coordinator, Trish Smouse, is our coordinator for the Salvation Army's anti-trafficking program. So Trish, if you want to speak to us, let me just hand this your way.
So just to, I guess, speak directly to our outreach efforts, as Michelle said, we do go out once a week and we just try to reach out to areas that were identified. We work with survivors to kind of map out what areas we go to in Columbus, as well as local law enforcement and members of the law enforcement task force to, again, identify those areas that are at most risk. And then when our partners from the AG's office sends out those missing children pictures and reports, then we take those with us and kind of brief all of the staff and team about who we're looking for and what we're doing. If they are identified, then we alert the Human Trafficking Task Force here in Central Ohio, who then respond to the situation.
And could I add, we have Mount Carmel Health Systems here too, which seems extremely valuable. Could you make a comment on your involvement and work?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I am the sexual assault coordinator for Mount Carmel Health, and I have been working with Salvation Army and other organizations to be able to help identify within the health system patients that are coming in presenting as human trafficking patients. We are able to reach out to those organizations and have that involvement within the hospital level in the emergency departments and provide resources to them, which has been very, very valuable. The education, getting the education throughout the health system as to what to look for in human trafficking patients has been and is key in helping medical providers and realizing when they are being presenting to the emergency department. So, we do see human trafficking that comes into the emergency department. We are able to reach out, and it's just been wonderful resources for us.
And I think Grace Haven wants to add to that. I saw that in your...
Absolutely. My name is Rachel Rosenthal. I'm a social worker at Grace Haven, and we are an agency here in the Columbus area who serve exclusively the youth who've been exploited for sex. And our efforts cover everything from direct case management, comprehensive case management to victims, to education to at-risk youth, and also education and training to other social service providers who are very likely to encounter such victims in their line of work. And through our partnership with the Salvation Army, we receive referrals for youth who are potential victims. And we also work very frequently with the juvenile justice system. There's nothing quite like the experience of sitting with a little girl, 15, 16 years old, who's sitting in front of you wearing handcuffs and shackles because the only place that she can be kept safe is in a prison or in a juvenile detention center, in a juvenile correctional facility. Those are the girls that I work with, and those are the girls that I'm here for today. And so I don't think it can be said frequently enough or loudly enough that jail is no place for a child who's been exploited or abused and manipulated for sex. And so I join with Laura and with all of these other wonderful women that I have the opportunity to interact with day in and day out because of their hard work and their efforts. And just echoing everything that they've said, that the service is so necessary for them and helping them recover. But then on the front end too, awareness to our youth. If the average age of entry into prostitution is 12 to 14 years old, those are the kids that we need to be targeting. At Grace Haven, we were very fortunate to have been able to reach 2,316 at-risk youth just in 2013 alone. And it's amazing to me every time I get to talk with them, their surprise that this is still happening. And as Teresa said, the methods of recruitment have not changed. And so, absolutely. In summation, just, I would just be echoing everything else that everyone said, but then also reaching out to our kids.
Thank you all so much. And the thing about, I think, anti-trafficking advocates is we could keep this going for about 8 or 9 more hours. And I think we are.
We got to let John say something.
Oh, okay.
He told us earlier he's interested in demand reduction. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Well, I work with the demand reduction, and Sister Nadine here a little bit about it, is we work with men with pornography. Because what we're learning is a lot of times men who have a problem with pornography, a lot of times they have girlfriend or wives, and while they're watching pornography, they want their wives to do something that they've seen on pornography, and their wives won't do it. So what they'll do is they'll end up going out and buying a prostitute or going on Craigslist or some of those other pages that are on the web to buy something like that, to have them do what they've seen on pornography. And it just spirals out of control because guys then are getting addicted to pornography, and it just gets us spiraling down. And pornography addiction is something that's really not talked about. And we need to be bringing that out and saying that we've got, we talk about alcohol addiction, we talk about drug addiction, but we don't talk about pornography addiction. And pornography addiction is hurting the families, they're hurting relationships, they're hurting marriages, and yet we don't talk about it. And that's the demand reduction side of it, is we're working with guys and women saying, hey, you know what, this is a problem, and we need to be doing something about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Okay, now I am being instructed by Stephen to turn it back to Senator Portman. So I hand it to Senator Portman with every bit of ability to override me should he decide.
Well, this has been very helpful for me, and I know for Congresswoman Beatty, and we do want your input going forward. And I mentioned a couple pieces of legislation that are working through the system. We want your input, and it's great to be with Representative Fetter again. Just to make the obvious point, this has got to be handled at every level. So it's on the street, it's in that motel or hotel that is a place where this horrific practice happens. It's online, and there was a story from last week, a guy in Cuyahoga Falls who went online advertising for a 10-year-old. Mm-hmm. And luckily, law enforcement provided a sting operation, Sergeant, and they provided a 10-year-old, but it was in the form of an arrest warrant.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be something that the whole community is involved with. And I really want to thank our host today, because being here, again, I think this is the right environment to talk about it. In your prayer, you talked about compassion. The comment was made about tender compassion for the victims of trafficking. I think that's the prayer that one of the sisters was saying. That's probably where we need to be. So it's got to be. It's not going to stop because there's a new law. It'll help, and there's some things, obvious things that need to be done. We talked about today, but it's going to happen because all of us come together and decide this is unacceptable, and this is contrary to the dignity and self-respect that every human being deserves. And really delighted to be here. Stay in touch with us. Mr. President, do you have anything you'd like to say? Peter, we always like to hear from you.
I don't have anything to add to the most eloquent testimony that has already been offered, but thank you, Senator, for your work, and Congressman, for your work.
Yeah, always great to be with you. And I'd like to turn it over to Congresswoman Beatty to offer the benediction to send us on our way.
I will make it short. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the support, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.